Hello, this is Katie from Crafting Ruby Dreams and welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about how to give critiques. I'm going to give you 5 guidelines to focus on when you are asked to do a critique and to guide you through the process of giving a critique. Guideline number 1, it's not about you. The work is the focus. Giving a critique means being critical with the intent to improve, not to find fault. So if you're going into this to rip something to shreds, and unless that is something specifically requested by the author, and I'll get to that in a minute, that is not the mindset for giving a critique in good faith. Guideline number 2, focus on kindness. This doesn't mean soft pedaling the areas that need improvement in the work, but you want to consider who the author is and the best way to communicate with them. Guideline number 3, determine the scope of the critique. Does the author need you to focus on plot, character development, world building, setting, any of those specifics, or do they want your overall thoughts on the areas where they need improvement? Another aspect to this is what time frame does the author need the critique back by? Guideline number 4, delivery process. This is related to scope in that you need to communicate with the author ahead of time to figure out what's going to work best. But for this, what I truly mean is you need to figure out what is the best way to communicate the critique to the author. Do they need you to be very blunt? Do they need you to open with something good, put in the critique in the middle, and then end with another good thing? It's hard when somebody who has asked you to critique their work and they've never been critiqued before, because they don't know what's going to be best in terms of making it work in their head. But as I said, I think for beginners, probably the best way to do this is to do the open with something good, put the critique, and end with maybe something that you loved. I think it's really important to emphasize that you need to have an agreement with them ahead of time as to how you are going to communicate the critique so they know what to expect. And guideline number 5, it's business, not personal. Keep the comments to the writing itself. Focus on the goal of improving the work, not necessarily that the author takes all of your suggestions for improvement. And for those of you who have never given a critique before, and I have seen this asked at times, you do not get a writing credit for doing a critique. I'd like to share a story about how I communicated with an editor about the best way to deliver a critique to me. Now, I talked about this a little bit in my Trying New Techniques video, and I will put that up in a card above. To go deeper into this, now, admittedly, this is an editor that I paid for, but the process is very similar when getting a pure critique, whether you're asking for the critique or you are being asked to give the critique. And the reason I say this is because this person is somewhat of a peer to me in that she is also an author, and we had worked together previously on an anthology as authors. So I had contributed a story and she had contributed a story. So we had a working relationship. And when I hired her to do the editing for this particular novella, I made it very clear that what works best for me is very blunt criticism. And part of that is because I sometimes have a hard time reading subtext when it comes to craft critiques. So I like it to be very blunt as to, you need more emotion here, or I can tell that it is supposed to be like happy, but I'm not feeling why. So I prefer my critiques and editing notes to be on the blunter side. Being blunt isn't going to work for everyone. Part of that is because not all people are comfortable with being very, very blunt when it comes to delivering critiques, and it is just not their communication style. I was very lucky in that this particular person, it is her communication style, and it's something that works for me. In this case, it was a great match between the two of us. But we were both very clear up front as to what we expected communication-wise out of her editing this particular novella. And as I said in the Trying New Techniques video, I didn't actually disagree with her at all as to what her editing suggestions were. It was just that particular version was not a version that I wanted to put out in the world, and that's fine. You have to take every editing note with a grain of salt. It is their perspective and their knowledge base, and if you're the author of the work, you are the ultimate decider. I once gave a critique definitely over 15 years ago, but less than 20 years ago, and it's just blowing my mind how long it's been. And the author who asked me for the critique was unpublished at that time, and she was asking me for my marketing knowledge because I had been a longtime romance reader, and I was reading a lot of the style of what she was writing. And I gave her my honest opinion, and she very rightly disregarded what I said. And she went on to become a New York Times bestselling author, exactly with the way that her style was. And her style was actually perfectly right for the time that she went on to publish. And that's the other thing, is that there are a lot of people who are only able to see what was already published, and they base their opinions on that in terms of market knowledge. And when something is traditionally published, that is up to 2 years out of date as to writing style, because of the fact that it was generally acquired 12 to 24 months prior to publication. If you are indie publishing, that market is much more reactionary and active, so it is what you are seeing published one day may have just been written and finished a couple weeks before. So that is much more real time in terms of style and market. But the thing about indie publishing is that the market shifts very quickly. Traditional publishing has problems with reacting to quick shifts in market, whereas indie publishing is, you may not be able to shift as quickly as indie publishing does. So those are just some things to keep in mind when you include market assessments with critiques. So those are my 5 guidelines for giving critiques, and I hope that you have found this useful. If you have any suggestions for giving critiques to other people, or how to receive critiques, just general etiquette, feel free to drop those in the comment. I greatly appreciate that, and I know the community who follows also will greatly appreciate it. I thank you for being here. If you have found anything in this video useful, please hit that like button so that YouTube knows to recommend this video to others. I hope you will also consider hitting the subscribe button and the bell to be notified of when future videos are available. This is especially important right now if you are watching this in November and December of 2020, because my schedule is changing up a little bit as to when I'll be publishing videos. Right now, the videos will be weekly in November and bi-weekly in December. So thank you so much for joining me here today, and may all your dreams be Ruby dreams. Bye-bye. I'm going to give you 5... Shush! You gonna be done with that alarm? I'm not sure if it's gonna be picked up by the lavalier mic, so I'm gonna hold off. There we go. How do I want to frame this? That's a good question.